You can be surrounded by people and still feel like a stranger in the room. Everyone else seems to know the rhythm of the conversation. When to laugh, when to lean in. You're there, physically, completely present, and somehow still on the outside of something you can't quite name. Most people have felt this at least once. Some people feel it almost everywhere they go. For a long time, psychology treated this feeling as incidental. A mood, a passing discomfort, nothing more. But research over the past 3 decades has made a different case entirely. That the need to belong isn't a preference. It's closer to a requirement. As basic, in its own way, as food, or sleep, or safety. This is the story of why fitting in matters so much to the human brain, and why not fitting in can hurt more than most people are willing to admit. In 1995, 2 psychologists, Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary, published a paper that would go on to become one of the most cited in the history of the field. Its central claim was simple, almost deceptively so. Human beings have a fundamental need to belong, not a nice-to-have, a need. Their argument drew on decades of scattered evidence, pulled into a single frame. People form social bonds easily, under almost any circumstance. And once formed, people resist breaking those bonds, even when the relationship costs them something. Across culture after culture, isolation from others was linked to worse outcomes, emotionally, cognitively, even physically. Baumeister and Leary proposed something specific. Belonging isn't just about surviving. It's a motivational engine underneath enormous amounts of human behavior. Why we conform, why we fear public failure, why rejection from a group we don't even like can still sting. One theory proposes that this drive is evolutionary in origin. For most of human history, exclusion from the group didn't just feel bad, it was dangerous. A person cast out of the tribe lost access to shared food, protection, and mates. The individuals who felt that danger acutely, who were wired to notice and avoid exclusion, were simply more likely to survive and pass that wiring forward. If that theory holds, then the discomfort of not belonging isn't a flaw in modern life. It's an old alarm system, still running, sometimes going off in rooms where the actual stakes are much lower than they once were. If belonging is truly a need, you'd expect its absence to register the same way other threats to survival do. And in 2003, a study offered striking evidence that it might. Psychologist Naomi Eisenberger and her colleagues at Ookla designed an experiment around a simple video game called Cyberball. Participants believed they were playing catch with 2 other people online. In reality, the other players were controlled by the researchers. After a few friendly rounds, the 2 players stopped passing the ball to the participant entirely. Nothing dramatic happened. No one said a cruel word. The person was simply, quietly, left out. While this happened, participants lay inside an fMRI scanner. Research suggests the brain regions that lit up during that small, artificial exclusion, the anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, were the same regions known to activate during physical pain. The more distress a person reported feeling, the more active those regions became. Being left out of a simple ball-tossing game, in other words, may register in the brain in ways that echo actual physical injury. The phrase "hurt feelings" may be less metaphor than it sounds. This finding has not gone unchallenged, and it shouldn't be presented as settled fact. A later, larger analysis of multiple brain imaging studies on social rejection questioned whether exclusion truly activates the exact same pain matrix as a physical injury, or whether the overlap is more limited and complex than the original study suggested. Science rarely closes a question this quickly, and this one is still open. What most researchers do agree on is that something real is happening in the brain during social exclusion, even if exactly how closely it mirrors physical pain remains debated. A single game of cyberball is a brief, artificial sting. But what happens when the feeling of not belonging isn't occasional, when it becomes a person's ongoing experience of the world? Julianne Holt-Lunstad and colleagues conducted a large meta-analysis pulling together data from dozens of studies, spanning decades and hundreds of thousands of participants, examining loneliness, social isolation, and mortality risk. Their findings suggest that chronic social isolation is associated with a meaningfully increased risk of early death, a risk that, in some comparisons, rivaled or exceeded the risk associated with obesity and approached that of smoking. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. This doesn't mean loneliness directly causes death in some simple mechanical way. The relationship is almost certainly more complicated. Isolation affects sleep, stress hormones, immune function, and health behaviors, all of which compound over years. But the scale of the association is difficult to dismiss. The need to belong, when consistently unmet, appears to leave a mark not just on mood, but on the body itself. Here is what all of this suggests. Put simply, the ache of not belonging is not a character flaw, and it is not oversensitivity. It may be one of the oldest, most deeply wired responses a human being has. That reframing matters, because so many people who feel like outsiders quietly conclude the opposite, that something is wrong with them specifically, that everyone else has found the code to belonging, and they alone are missing it. But belonging is not evenly distributed by talent or worth. It's shaped by circumstance, by which rooms a person has had access to, by which groups happen to form around them, by timing as much as character. Many people who feel chronically excluded in one context are deeply embedded, valued members of another community entirely. The feeling of not belonging often says more about fit than it does about worth. There's also something worth naming about the particular cruelty of feeling unseen while surrounded by people. Physical isolation is at least legible. The absence is visible, explainable. Social isolation inside a crowd is harder, because from the outside, it looks like the opposite of a problem. No one checks in on the person smiling at the party who feels, quietly, like they're watching it through glass. And perhaps this is where the ancient alarm system becomes something more useful than a burden. If the need to belong evolved because connection once meant survival, then the discomfort of exclusion is, in its own strange way, evidence of how much the drive to connect still matters. The ache is proof of the wiring, not a failure of it. None of this guarantees an easy fix. Belonging can't be willed into existence by a single conversation or a single research finding. But understanding that the need is real, not weakness, not neediness, but a documented, near-universal human requirement, can change how a person relates to the feeling when it shows up. Less like a private defect, more like a signal every human brain is built to send. Somewhere tonight, someone is standing in a full room, feeling entirely alone in it. They are not imagining the ache. They are not weak for feeling it. They are running one of the oldest systems the human mind has, a system built, long before language, to notice when connection is missing. Because for most of history, connection was survival. Understanding why it hurts doesn't make the room feel less crowded, but it may make the ache feel a little less like a verdict, and a little more like what it actually is.